A lot of times when people recognize that they're polyamorous, they're currently in a monogamous relationship. And for that reason, when they do open up their relationship, they may be tempted to operate as a unit. In the polyamorous community, we tend to describe this as couples privilege, when a couple moves forward with the idea that every relationship outside of the one that they're currently in should always come after their primary relationship. In the polyamorous community, we would typically describe this as a hierarchy, and it's something that many of us, especially on the left, are trying to get away from. That's where Decolonizing Love comes into picture, a leftist platform geared at talking about love from a decolonial lens. With their large platform on TikTok, Instagram, and elsewhere, they have become a very important voice for non-monogamous folks who are attempting to educate themselves about polyamory from a non-colonized perspective, often being many people's first stop for their polyamory education. But recently, they've been posting some, let's just say, questionable things on their social media page that has led a lot of people to asking a pretty central question. From their liberal use of AI to their defense of settler colonialism abroad, how dedicated are they exactly to decolonizing love? And that's the conversation we're going to be having in this video. But as per usual, I'm getting ahead of myself yet again. Hi, my name is katblaque, and I like to think that I make content for introspective hot people. And if you're here, I'll assume that's you. And if you're brand new here, you know exactly what to do if this video pleases you. You just click my button right here and join us on the channel. I want to start out right away by saying that I am not particularly invested in canceling anyone. And I think if you've ever gotten the impression from my content that that's what I'm about, you weren't really paying attention. To me, I always have these conversations with the thought in the back of my mind that there's an audience of people who may have many of the same unhelpful thoughts, we'll just say. And for that reason, I make content not really ever trying to tear down a particular creator, but with the idea that the audience and maybe even that creator who's included in that audience can hear what I'm saying and maybe rethink some of the things that they confidently believe in. As a polyamorous person, we are constantly having conversations about what is good and what is bad. And a lot of content that is made that is geared towards education isn't great. In fact, in the very beginning of this video, I was holding up this book, More Than Two. It is a book that you will probably be suggested to read far too many times if you are trying to find resources in the poly community. If I was going to tell you a resource to look into about polyamory, learning about the pitfalls of polyamory, especially navigating through it if you are in a couple, I would actually direct you to www.itrippeddownthepolystair.com, because Franklin Vo, who is the co-author of this book, who went on to write quite a few other books about polyamory, is not a great guy. And actually, in the testimonials of the women and non-binary folk who Franklin Vo has harmed, there's a lot of great information that people can get about navigating polyamory in an ethical way. But Franklin Vo does stand as a representation in many ways of how polyamory content can go out into the world and can have somewhat of a positive impact, but how it can also have a negative impact as well. And really what I'm going to try to be addressing in this video is some of the dissonance between some of Decolonizing Love's posts and also what I can see as their not so positive impact. Decolonizing Love has not only established themselves as a large and influential platform that is geared towards poly education, but they are also a business charging for peer support and other things. And for that reason, I felt the need to put out my perspective into the universe that sort of counters some of what they're saying, if only so that people have a different answer. So anyway, I know that a lot of you guys watching this video are probably not at all aware of what or who Decolonizing Love is, so let's get into it. Who is Decolonizing Love? Nick and Millie are a polyamorous couple living in Toronto, Canada. Millie is a Black non-binary person who immigrated from Kenya as a child, and they come from a polyamorous household and have been polyamorous their entire lives. Millie is an artist and activist, or artivist as they like to call it, and they've worked in the film and TV industry for years. Nick is a white man who has been polyamorous for 14 years, and he's an activist whose work primarily centers around undoing toxic masculinity. Together, they coach and educate the polycurious through social media, where they've amassed impressive numbers. They sell a relationship agreement for $149 on their website that has apparently appeared in Business Insider. And yes, a very important thing to note about them is that they are indeed a business. On their website, they sell peer support, and you may ask what exactly their qualification for doing so is. And you'll find that it is essentially just that they've been doing it for a long time. And that's all well and good, but if you've been on our polyamory, and trust me, if you haven't in a while, I do not blame you, you will have seen that recently there have been some people who have had their issues with their peer support and have called it out as unhelpful. One couple who went to them left a session wanting to end their relationship after they were diagnosed as a fraysexual. They say, one of my partners and I did a coaching session with them, and it was a very negative experience in the aftermath. My partner and I almost broke up. My partner had just been diagnosed with ASD and struggles with social cues, like cues around dating, sex, etc. The topic that they kept bringing up was that they thought my partner was fraysexual and no longer sexually attracted to me. He told me that he did not think that that was the case, but they continued to tell him that he just didn't know it because of his ASD. It was one of the worst experiences I have had. A fraysexual, by the way, is someone on the A spectrum who is primarily attracted to people who they do not know. And outside of Reddit, there have been a few comments and posts on Instagram of people who've also received peer support from them that was not very good. I would say that the vast majority of content that Decolonizing Love makes is specifically about hierarchy. So let's go over what they believe in when it comes to hierarchy. Why hierarchical polyamory is unethical. Hierarchical polyamory definition. Hierarchical polyamory is an open relationship structure that organizes power by ranking primary partners above secondaries and sometimes even tertiary partners. Essential elements of a polyhierarchy are the primary has the ability to make rules about a relationship that they're not in. They're ultimately in control of all relationships below them in rank. A primary partner can veto a relationship, i.e. put an end to who their partner is dating. Power is asymmetrical. Secondaries and tertiary partners cannot leverage the same power against a primary. Secondaries and tertiaries have no say in any decisions. Decisions are told to them and not created with them. Why is hierarchical polyamory unethical? Hierarchical polyamory is essentially unethical because it strips agency and ongoing consent from a partner. Decisions about one's relationship should not be made by someone outside of it. Additionally, ranking and numbering human beings is dehumanizing and particularly disrespectful in intimate relationships. While relationships may vary in polyamory, everyone deserves equal respect. Hierarchical polyamory isn't true polyamory. Hierarchical polyamorists are essentially monogamists who are driven by a fear of losing their primary partner, so they reserve true love and security for them, while leading a secondary partner to believe in a similar affection and depth. However, they curtail these partners' agencies and decision-making by maintaining a dynamic where they have one true love and only casually care for the rest. So there's a couple of different understandings of hierarchy that we tend to conflate a lot within polyamory. There is a type of hierarchy that is a deliberate, this partner is better than my other partners and therefore doesn't get to demand the same amount of time from me. And then there's what I've often felt, which is more of a hierarchy of your commitments, your established commitments, right? My experience with hierarchy is that there's only so much time in the day. If you're someone who has several commitments to several partners and I just start dating you and you're not super available to actually go on dates and build anything, that would be more meaningful, that's going to feel like hierarchy to me. Even if you're not explicitly saying, hey, these partners are more important to me. I've been in relationships with married men, for example, right? And sometimes in those relationships, there is always this feeling that you're never going to be as important to him as his wife is. For some people, that may seem like a, oh, duh, like obviously kind of thing. But within polyamory, I'm not interested in being someone's mistress. I'm not interested in being your little ethnic candy on the side. I am interested in love. So it's very important to me, even if a person says that they're non-hierarchical, for me to understand how much time do you realistically have to date a person. And honestly, ever since I've really come to that understanding, I've been able to find partners who get me and understand me and are on the same page as me in terms of our time commitment and our ability to see each other. A lot of people in polyamory are trying to avoid hierarchy, and for that reason, they don't love terms like primary partner. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that it's a term that I tend to use quite a bit to refer to my partner, Edward, who I spend most of my time with and do most of my long-term life planning with. For example, Edward is about to fly with me to Boston so that I can go see my father. My father is on his deathbed, and he is the partner who goes and does that sort of thing with me. My family really loves him, but just because I have a primary partner doesn't mean that my other partners are ranked on a scale. You know, I use primary partner to describe the partner that I primarily spend most of my time with, right? The partner who I tend to make my plans around, the partner whose lifestyle tends to be the most compatible with mine. And so we tend to coexist in the same space at the same time the most frequently. I always feel like it's important for me when I talk to new people to establish that I have someone like that in my life right now, if only so that we have a clear understanding of how much time and capacity I actually have. I kind of feel like it's more important for us to talk about what our capacity is than it is to sort of play these word games of whether or not you're doing something from the perspective of couples privilege or not. As an extension of Decolonizing Love's disdain for hierarchy, they have taken aim at BDSM, and they've specifically attacked it for its reflection of colonial violence.
Women-centered? Ugh, too boring. Maybe give us a non-indigenous kink, like, I don't know, something European?
Yeah, something more manly with, like, power vibes.
We've got just the thing. It is called BDSM, bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism. Fun fact, sadism is named after the Marquis de Sade, who had a habit of torturing his women servants.
Perfect! Sign us up!
Just a reminder, consent is kind of a big deal in BDSM today.
Consent schmusent. It's a suggestion, just virtual signaling. So many people are gonna be so bad at it.
And patriarchy already barely understands consent. Add BDSM, it's gonna be marvelous.
And we wouldn't even have to throw these away. We can still use them!
Where'd you get them? I thought we got rid of them.
They were in the plantation attic.
The cultural values enforced by European colonization and the legacy of Christian imperialism include monogamy, the nuclear family, heteronormativity, hierarchical thinking, a lack of community, and BDSM. In isolation, some of these are benign, but as social norms, they perpetuate the culture of the system.
I posted about how the godfather of BDSM is the Marquis de Sade, and some folks got upset about that. Who knew this was something that was even contested? But also, I get why practitioners of BDSM want to distance themselves from him. The Marquis de Sade occupies a controversial yet pivotal spot in the history of sexual kink. While the term BDSM, a comprehensive acronym covering bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, surfaced online in 1991, its roots trace back centuries.
I recently posted a reflection on BDSM and its ties to colonial denominator culture. Some responded by pointing to BDSM-like practices in other cultures as counterexamples, but each example was from another imperialist or hierarchical society. This made me realize that for many, colonial is seen as purely European, leading to the misconception that any non-European, non-white culture can be labeled indigenous, even if those cultures are hierarchical or caste-based. Simply being non-European does not make a society indigenous, nor does it exempt it from oppressive structures. The term colonization originates from the Latin colonus, meaning farmer, initially reflecting land seizure for agricultural control. As agriculture expanded, so did the need for new land, leading to hierarchical systems to manage resources and populations. Colonization thus embedded hierarchies justified by claims of cultural or racial superiority. Colonization inherently involves hierarchy with rules at the top and others below. This structure is closely tied to patriarchy, embedding gender inequality. Mesopotamia, for example, spread its model of domination, influencing Greece, Rome, and later Europe. But hierarchical imperialism isn't exclusive to Europe. Empires like the Aztecs, Incas, and Millie expanded through conquest, establishing rigid societal control. Understanding colonization as rooted in hierarchy reveals how caste and imperialism reflect colonial-like structures of power across cultures. Scholars like Edward Said and Maria Luanes argue that colonialism's legacy isn't limited to Europe, but it includes any structure enforcing domination. The United Nations defines indigenous peoples as original inhabitants with unique cultural practices and sustainable, often non-agricultural ways of living that emphasize harmony with nature. Unlike colonizers, indigenous societies maintained reciprocal, communal social systems rather than expanding through conquest and hierarchy. Now, speaking frankly, I genuinely don't think Millie actually does understand a lot about BDSM. I think Millie does a bunch of reading. I think Millie has this sort of objective perspective of what they're expecting to experience within BDSM, but I don't think they actually know. And what I mean when I say that is that BDSM is actually so much more than what you see on the surface. Yeah, the BDSM community does have, these things about power and control, submission and domination. Like, yeah, that's true, but that's such a small part of it. And I would actually say that in so many ways, that's not even the major part of it, right? Like, I think some people don't understand that people don't just do BDSM because they have some particular fetish for power exchange or someone being dominant over them or submissive to them, right? Like, that's a part of it for some people. It's not what it is in its entirety, right? Like, it is very common for a lot of people in this society to eroticize power and control, domination and submission. And yeah, some of that does come from colonialism, right? There's also some of us who simply enjoy having certain feelings, and it has very little to do with power, right? Like, I personally enjoy being tied up because I am a fidgety person. I'm a fidgety person who doesn't often stay still. And there's something about being bound in rope that is very deeply therapeutic to me, right? That's part of why I do rope. That's the major reason why I do rope. A lot of aspects of BDSM that I experience are about checking in with my body, waking myself up, and, experiencing something I want to experience in the way that I want to experience it, right? I don't particularly care if rope was used by Japanese cops. I don't particularly care if it was used during slavery. I enjoy being tied up, and I'm actually not going to allow that to prevent me from enjoying my body. I'm not. And I've already spoken very publicly about part of what I get out of being submissive is the fact that I sort of have to be dominant in my daily life. It is very cathartic for me to give someone else control in a scenario where I can't do that in my daily life. I can't just be in myself in my daily life. I can't feel like I'm doing service without it feeling expected of me in my daily life. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? For a lot of us, yes, BDSM may relate to certain aspects that are probably there because of colonization, but it's also very true that many of us don't really personally get off on power and control, but we also still do BDSM. It is actually a very simplistic way of looking at BDSM to think that it's only about power exchange, to think that it's only about domination and submission. I think that with respect, Millie is taking a very sophomoric understanding of BDSM and over-intellectualizing it. When I was reading a lot of Millie's posts about BDSM, the vibe I got from them is that they have an understanding of BDSM that is informed by some of the anxieties that they would have navigating through BDSM in a body like theirs, specifically a Black body that many people see as a femme body. Like, it is scary to be a Black bottom, right? Like, I'm a Black sub, I'm a Black bottom. In the BDSM community, I'm just going to be frank, it's a lot of white people. It is a lot of white people. And you really do have to think a lot about whether or not the people that you're doing BDSM with are doing BDSM for the reason they would want to do BDSM with everyone, or are they doing BDSM specifically with you because of a racial fetish? And I'll be honest and say that there were a couple of years in my early days in the LA BDSM scene where I would get kind of nervous about bottoming in public. I was bottoming for this dominant who was very popular at the time, and he was a white man, right? And I definitely would be concerned about the optics of me, especially doing what I do in a club, being hit by a white man, right? Like, there are very real concerns I think Millie has when it comes to navigating BDSM, but I still get the sense that they have a very surface level understanding of it. Personally, for me, I have to be very clear about what I'm into and what I'm not into, because I don't want to put myself in a situation where I could get hurt like that, right? One of the things that I am very strict about is I don't subscribe to master-slave play. And I don't subscribe to master-slave play for the reason that for me it does sort of touch a bit too closely on colonization and actual enslavement. I am a masochist. That for me means that I enjoy receiving pain, but I enjoy receiving pain in a very particular way. Am I trying to live out some sort of slave fantasy that I've internalized that I don't necessarily have at the forefront of my mind? No, I actually am very turned off by that. And race play, though it is very well represented on the internet, is not a huge aspect of the BDSM community. It's an anxiety that a lot of us have when we're navigating through BDSM, but I would say it's pretty uncommon, especially because it's pretty unpopular. A lot of people in the BDSM community have a very staunch opposition to race play. Maybe that's a reflection of the sort of town that I live in, but I know at several of the dungeons that I go to, race play is actually explicitly banned. I think that's actually kind of the interesting thing about some of her posts about BDSM. I don't think she knows a lot about who is in the BDSM community, because yeah, it's a lot of white people, but it's not just white people. It's not just white people. Like, the BDSM community, in comparison to a lot of other communities, is very political. Very, very, very political. I host an event in Los Angeles, and it is all about community. And a lot of the people who come to my event are politically organizing. Honestly, the meetup is kind of about that in a lot of ways, right? Meeting comrades, connecting with people who have a similar politic, and exploring some of maybe these BDSM things, but it's also a huge center for that sort of connection, right? Queer people doing political work, right? There's a ton of people who show up to my event who fall into that description. And that's why I think some of her posts are so interesting, because I don't think that they would be trying to make foes of people who are in BDSM, because of the people who do BDSM, it's a high concentration of people who are typically left-leaning, who are typically leftist-leaning, who are typically very politically minded, who also believe in defending their shit, because defending their shit means defending everyone, right? Like, a lot of the people I know within the BDSM community are sex workers, right? It's very easy for people to dismiss what sex workers go through and the advocacy work that sex workers do, but it's something that touches everyone, right? It's something that will touch all of us. And if you want to know more about that, watch my video that I made about the Bop House, where I talk a bit more about sex work and the reality of fosta sesta, which is not to protect children or keep trafficking from happening. It's actually just to collect your data and to, make it so that you have a direct connection between what you post on the internet and the government, right? That is concerning for a lot of reasons, but I want for people to understand that all of these things are connected, and the people that you are stigmatizing within BDSM, the people that you are stigmatizing within sex work are part of the group of people who are trying to make that not happen. And so it is really aggravating to me when people go out of their way to stigmatize BDSM. But of course, as a woman in BDSM, I understand why some people would. It's very easy to get a bad experience in the BDSM community, as I've spoken about many, 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 many times. A lot of the things that people fetishize are things that we would probably think without colonization. Power and control, someone being stronger than you, bigger than you, right? Someone guiding you, being older than you, right? Like, these things would exist without colonization. There are things that we're going to talk about later that we do need to criticize that exist because of colonization, but people acting as if this stuff would only exist when colonization happens, I don't think are really speaking from any intimate understanding of kink, frankly. And it's fine if you're not into it. It is totally fine. To my understanding, Millie is on the asexual spectrum, which does not mean that they do not do these things. But, it makes sense if it's not a feeling you experience. It makes sense if it's not something that you have direct involvement with. There are a lot of people in this society that are dedicated to making BDSM a terrible thing. And one of the things that really annoyed me is that there were a couple of comments underneath the post that she made about BDSM on Facebook that conflated the abuses that the prisoners experience in Abu Ghraib to what we do in BDSM. And it is really frustrating. It is really, 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 really frustrating when people who I think should know better choose to reinforce and double down on stigma purely because they want to. Purely because they're ignorant and because they want to, right? I think it is really repulsive to think that these two things are the same. Incredibly repulsive. I think it's so reductive to say, especially for people of color, that the only reason why they're participating in these things is because they have some epigenetic desire to receive violence or give violence. I think that speaks very little of humanity. I think it imagines very little of our human sexuality as well, right? I think that thinks very little of humanity, if I'm being frank. And I think it's sad that that's what people imagine is the entirety of what we're doing in BDSM. But there's so much more to it than that. One of the things that really stands out whenever I read Millie's response to criticism is it really does feel a lot to me like Millie does believe in hierarchy. Like, Millie does believe that because they've got a certain degree of education, because they've got a certain follower count, because they've been cited XYZ, ZYX, that people should be looking up to them as an authority. Reverence to an authority, of course, being one of the main imports of colonization, right? And honestly, this attitude is really, really demonstrated quite well in their response to their AI pictures. Are you even talented if AI art is better than your work? I'm a writer, and my friends span across the arts: painters, graphic designers, musicians, and we all come to the similar conclusion. AI, at least for now, doesn't invent, it remixes. It replicates patterns that already exist. But great art break patterns. It reaches into unfamiliar emotional or imaginative territory and brings back something we didn't know we needed. One of my litmus tests for critical thinking is where someone stands on AI. If someone is loudly anti-AI for environmental reasons, but still scrolls Instagram or Facebook platforms run by Meta, which has a larger environmental footprint than all of AI combined due to the energy demands of cloud-based social media infrastructure, I know that I'm not dealing with someone who applies their values consistently or even thinks them through with depth. They're following outrage, not reason. And I don't respect that kind of thinking. Now, you probably saw these AI images earlier when I was showing you those slides about hierarchy. And what gets me about these AI images is they are ugly. They're ugly and they were not necessary. Like, what's interesting to me about this is when I look at these graphics, like as a graphic designer, you don't need them. There was nothing about the image of the couple standing on the throne and all these people of color beneath them that helped communicate the point even more. All it did was add a visual element that, of course, could mean that it would do better in the algorithm, right? But overall, it's just ugly. And more than that, it's lazy. There was even a situation where they put a graph in one of their videos and it was terribly misspelt. Very clearly, Millie went into AI, whatever generator they use. I don't do these generating things, so I don't know which one they used. It's clear that they made the AI generate the same exact chart that had already existed but was created by a different person. But they wanted a version for themselves that they could use in their video, right? Something that they could use without crediting people. And I think that's something to think about. They didn't even look at it. They just used it uncritically, right? They just put it in the video. And you guys have to understand that that's like several steps, right? That means that they generated the image on their computer or their phone. They downloaded it, put it into CapCut probably, and put it into that picture and posted it all before seeing that it was not correct. That to me is just sheer laziness. Laziness. And that is, in my opinion, something that should get people to question why exactly they're listening to what they have to say. Because to go through that many hoops and still, like, this seems like something really small. But to me, to go through that many hoops and still fuck it up says something. It really, really says something. For me personally, it says a lot when you also embrace AI, knowing what it's being used for, knowing how it's been used, and understanding, ironically, the way that it's being used to normalize and justify colonization. Like, there's a reason why they probably had to deliberately say, oh yeah, and also make those peons down there colored, right? Because at the end of the day, AI art is generating from, frankly, a very white supremacist source. So for me, Millie's use of AI is just a sign of how callous and lazy they are sometimes in what they post. And frankly, that laziness has unfortunately led to them posting some hateful content. Decolonizing Love shared this post, a transphobic version of a very popular Devil Wears Prada meme. And when asked about this post, Millie had realized their mistake and followed it up with an apology where they said that they were essentially posting something really quick without looking it over. And, you know, as a content creator, I really do understand making posts like this accidentally. I mean, there's definitely been times where I've shared something without thinking, but I think it's really important to be aware of the fact that the stuff you share and post can hurt people. And that was something that very much hurt people. But this wouldn't be the only time where they would say something questionable about transgender people. And this time they said it in their own words. I see trans women as women. And part of what draws me more to trans women than cis women is that I'm especially attracted to pre-op trans women. As a pansexual, it feels like the best parts of the genders I'm into come together in one. I prefer real anatomy to the experience of using strap-ons. I'm also drawn to people who have faced adversity, and I believe that it fosters empathy and depth. The most compassionate and humane people I know are trans, and I can't help but wonder if this might also connect to the spiritual roles that trans people have held in many cultures as wisdom keepers and intermediaries. For me, there's something profoundly inspiring about the resilience and insight that often comes with navigating a world that challenges one's very existence. This was actually one of the main things that made me want to make this video, because what aggravates me about a lot of the conversations that we have about hierarchy within polyamory is that we often ignore the way that trans people factor into the equation. And what I've experienced quite a bit, is cis people who are in a relationship with other cis people who open up their relationship and almost explicitly want to open it up so that they could explore something with a transgender person, right? And a lot of times in this scenario, the person who is being explored is effectively put into a position where they are only seen as a sexual plaything that satisfies the relationship that they're in, right? And that is a situation that I've been in many, 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 many times. And it's something that I am really averse to. And I thought that it was really interesting that Millie said this, understanding their position about hierarchy, because very clearly you get the sense in this post that Millie has a more hierarchical way of viewing transgender women, right? Keeping in mind, Millie identifies as pansexual, right? So in theory, it shouldn't really matter what the genitalia of the transgender woman she's trying to connect with is. But she explicitly says that she wants to connect with a non-op or pre-op trans woman who could fuck them with their meat stick. That is basically what they said. And I'll tell you this, right? From my experience, just in general, being a trans woman and dating, there are a lot of people. Now, I only date men, so this, I'm going to say men, but this is my experience. We're talking about my experiences. There are a lot of men who will place you on a hierarchy based on whether or not you are willing to fulfill a particular sexual interest of theirs, right? So for me personally, I've spoken about this many times very openly. I am someone who on multiple levels cannot do what the dolls on Shemale Yum do. I'm someone who could not physically perform the act that Millie is interested in. And I'm also someone who isn't sexually interested in performing the act that Millie was interested in, right? It is twofold for me in that it literally can't happen. And also I don't want it to, right? And for that reason, I have been deprioritized. Maybe there are people who really enjoy me as a person, but because I don't like what they like, have decided that I am not a person that they want to date long term. That is a very common way that I've experienced hierarchy, where if I didn't want to do this thing sexually to this person, right, I would be demoted to maybe just a friend that they had, sexy feelings for. And here's the thing that aggravates me about this. I think Millie, if they have that desire, should pursue those things. I think if you feel that way about a transgender body and that is what you're into, you should be very clear about having that interest, having that preference, and having that desire, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with loving a transgender woman's body. I think that when you end up in a situation where you are trying to act then like your preference does not then come with hierarchy, you are tricking yourself. And this is, again, the thing that aggravates me about these conversations. You have these non-hierarchical people who say that they don't have hierarchy, who say that they don't identify as hierarchical, but the reality is they do. The reality is if I dated people like Millie would not be interested in pursuing me or would only be interested in pursuing certain things with me because of that. And ultimately, the moment that, they would go on to find that pre or non-op doll who wants to do the thing with them, they would go and then want to spend more time with them because that's the person that they're sexually compatible with. And the thing that aggravates me about this is, again, there's nothing wrong with any of that, right? There is nothing wrong with you meeting someone and preferring to spend most of your time with them because you are the most compatible with them, right? Like, I do understand why so many people take issue with this because obviously if we are trying to move out of our more monogamous way of looking at things, it's important for us to be aware of, the way that preference and shit can, it can make it like that, right? But at the end of the day, you need to be aware of what you're doing and aware of the fact that while you may not feel like you're doing hierarchy, That is not going to be the experience of people on the other side. For people like me on the other side who are consistently sidelined and dismissed as people that can't be seen as serious partners, it is very obviously hierarchical when you have an interest and attraction to trans women, but you have a string of cis women as your primary partners, and you only manage to find time to fuck your trans partners. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is very clear. And it's something that no one really wants to talk about. No one really ever draws attention to, because people who want to be seen as non-monogamous don't want to be honest about it. You don't want to be honest about the fact that you have a preference, that there's a reason why you're pansexual, but most of your partners are men. You know what I mean? Like, there are reasons for these things, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging those reasons and being real. The thing that gets me about some people within polyamory, and within a lot of the communities I'm in, frankly, people want to fool themselves. They want to trick themselves into thinking that they can opt out, right? And really what you need to do, instead of trying to be, the most ideologically pure in the room, is be honest about where you're at. Be honest about what capacity you truly have. And when you do that, I find you're able to find relationships that work for you. I have always been very honest and clear about my capacity and my availability to date and connect with people. I think because I was like that with all of my current partners, I am able to have the relationships that I have, right? There were men that I dated in my past who had preferences for what they would like to do with transgender women's bodies, right? So I made a point of removing those men from my dating pool and only including the men who were actually interested in me and could care less about what my genitalia is. Now, you could say that's pansexual, but clearly Millie is operating from a different use of that term. Most of my partners do identify as heterosexual, but that's neither here nor there. Go watch my video that I made about T.S. Madison and Nene Leakes if you want to hear more of my thoughts about that. But at the end of the day, I don't care what my partners label themselves. I care about whether or not they are attracted to me and are interested in being in a long-term relationship with me. Right? Those are the important things for me to establish right up front. And I have to establish that they don't have a purely sexual relationship or interest in me. Poly folks will often make the point, and it is true, that not all relationships need to necessarily be loving. But when you reserve your loving relationships for cis people, right? Millie has never dated a trans person long term. I think that they've come out and said this, right? That is going to obviously feel a certain way. And I just get really aggravated with the way that we talk about this shit, because my experience dating non-hierarchical people is almost always that they deprioritize me because I'm a trans woman. They'll never say that because it contradicts with their politics, right? To me, this is a chaser message, right? This is a chaser message. It is a very clear, I fetishize transgender bodies kind of message. And look, if that's how you feel, if you like it, I love it. But what aggravates me is people will be aware of the fact that they feel this way, but then they'll act as if it's a bad thing for them to be honest about it. This is a message of Millie very explicitly saying, hey, I actually do prefer certain trans bodies over others. That is a hierarchy. That is a very clear hierarchy. And it's a hierarchy that we feel in our romantic relationships, because oftentimes what we're able to do sexually, even though there shouldn't be the case, relates directly to whether or not someone is interested in pursuing us long-term romantically, right? So what happens when you happen to be in a trans body, a body that the state looks at a certain way, right? And you also want love. Well, you're having to engage with a lot of people who, get this, exist under colonization, who have to unpack all of those things to finally get to the point where they recognize, hey, this person in front of me is more than just their parts, more than just this black and white thing. that I've been told people are. My politics are low-key really based in a research paper that I did when I was in high school about two-spirited people. I did a research paper and I spoke about how when the white man came to the Americas, they observed in certain cultures that there was a bit of gender diversity, that there were people who were existing in between genders, and these people were celebrated and respected and understood. They had a particular space within their communities. And because the white man was trying to instill patriarchy, they killed those people. Because patriarchy requires man and woman, these two solid ideas of what kind of person you're supposed to be. Women are supposed to have children for the state. Men are supposed to exert violence for the state and labor within it, right? That is kind of the basis there. They had to convince people that these are the rules you have to play so that people have workers, right? That is a very obvious, clear connection between modern day white nationalism that is using transphobia and colonization, right? For me, if you're decolonizing love, that is a big part of it. Not necessarily shifting around your gender, but understanding that we have many of the conceptions that we have because of these ideas about gender that were imported through colonization. Because monogamy really only matters in a culture where fatherhood really matters, right? Because the only reason a woman should be monogamous to this man is so that he can make sure that the kid's his, right? And the only reason many men have children is so that they could spread their legacy. And the only reason they feel like they need to spread their legacy is because of patriarchy. And frankly, one of the only reasons they have patriarchy within them is because of religion, right? Religion that was a major tool of colonization, right? And so to me, it's strange that they would say this. It's strange that they would look at trans women as preferable to cis women, specifically because of their parts. A lot of trans women who do end up having that surgery experience a very shocking reality where after they've had the surgery, suddenly all of these people, yes, even the pansexual ones who said that they didn't care about genitalia, are no longer interested in them. And you know, what was funny to me about this comment too is I'm really inspired by people who have been through really hard things is such a chaser tell. It is such a chaser tell because if you were actually inspired by the bullshit that trans women have had to overcome, you wouldn't load more on their plate, right? You wouldn't go out of your way to reaffirm to a trans woman that their value is their genitalia and the sex that they can perform for you. See, that's part of why it's so hurtful for people to say stuff like this, right? Because you are making some huge leaps, right? You are assuming that a trans woman who has her original plumbing wants to fuck you, right? And then has been able to maintain a hormone regimen or lack thereof that would give her a functional penis for which to fuck you with, right? And then you're kind of designing this version of her that is really there to pleasure you, right? As she says, she prefers the real thing over plastic, right? So all of this is objectifying. All of this is dehumanizing. And it was all done very publicly for multiple trans people to read and see. And multiple trans people had to get the realization that, yeah, you know what? Millie does look at you as an object created to satisfy them. And, you know, to me, that particular comment really, really, really did say a lot. And Millie would go on to apologize about this. A comment that I made over a year ago where I expressed attraction to trans women has resurfaced. It was taken out of context by someone who's been obsessively targeting us for a long time. But I want to be clear, I'm not here to dismiss harm just because it came from someone with bad intentions. Since then, I've spoken to some really brilliant trans activists who have helped me understand why language matters, especially when talking about desire. I've come to see how well-meaning words can reinforce harmful dynamics if we're not careful. Personally, I have dated a lot of non-hierarchical people who do things that to me feel very hierarchical. In fact, one of Millie's rules for her own relationships really hints at one of the major things that I've experienced that makes me feel this way. Every time someone claims it's controlling to want to be informed before a partner sleeps with someone new, I have to resist the urge to ask, so who in your past weaponized your vulnerability to control you? Your parents or an ex-spouse? Because people who react this way are projecting their own experiences onto the situation. They're equating sharing information with control, likely because they've been manipulated in the past. But that's their baggage talking, not an inherent truth about communication in relationships. I've never told a partner that they couldn't sleep with someone after informing me of their plans, nor would I ever use guilt or shame to manipulate them. The fact that some people would assume vulnerability will lead to control, that's a trauma response. One thing I've definitely noticed looking through some of Millie's posts is that there's a certain air they take on when they receive criticism. This rule of your partner needing to inform you before you have sex is one of those rules that I partially understand, but being on the other end of it, I know how it feels, and it isn't great, right? I have been on dates with men where the date went really, really well. The date is leaning in a certain direction. Maybe we're gonna canoodle or something, right? And the guy has to stop, take a moment to go somewhere else to like text or phone call his partner to essentially get approval. And if I'm being honest, of the men that I've dated who have had to do that, none of those men have panned out. Because a lot of the times they end up getting vetoed, right? And vetoing, for those of you guys who may not understand the term, is when your partner decides that you do not have the ability to date this new person that you want to date, right? They veto that partner from you and say, nope, she's out, right? And I've had that happen. I've had men pursue me, but then say that they can't pursue me because their partner is uncomfortable with it for X reason or another. And I've also had men take the step out to call their partner and hear no back from their partner. And the date has to kind of end in this really weird and clunky way. And in those situations, in those scenarios, I definitely feel like there's a hierarchy. I definitely feel like there's someone in this relationship that I am not dating who is controlling whether or not they can pursue me. All over Reddit, many pointed out that this seemed like a contradiction to their position. A user says, wanting to know when a partner has sex can be important for sexual health reasons mostly. In a heads up, there's tons of practical considerations. Suddenly, you can't be focused on the partner that you're with. Might we be having sex too soon? Should I step out and give the heads up now? You might not even think that you are going to have sex with this person at all. Maybe it's a hookup. Maybe it's a flirt with someone at a party or a good friend you suddenly realize you feel sexy around. Whatever it is, you now have to always be thinking about your other relationships rule. I want to know if there's a change in a sexual status before it can affect me is what you're going for in the heads up rule. But it has this accidental or worse, purposeful control of your partner's other relationships. It's not explicitly in your control, but it's implicitly there, discouraging sex or adding anxiety and worry to other relationships. Someone responds and says, exactly this. They explain the need for this rule by stating Millie doesn't want to date impulsive people, which is just a lot of words to beat around wanting to control their partner. I know that for a lot of people who are not polyamorous who are hearing this may seem strange, but frankly, when my partners go on dates with people, I assume that they may end up having sex with that person. Now, I personally think that there's a pretty big difference between telling your partner before and telling your partner after. I don't think that there's anything wrong with having a communication with your partner about what you're doing and, whether or not you're going to do it. I get the whole, I'm going to go over to this person's house, don't leave the light on for me sort of reason to have that conversation. I don't necessarily understand being polyamorous and then being somewhat uncomfortable about the idea that your partner is going to have sex with another person, because to me, at the end of the day, that's kind of what that is, right? Why would you need to know that your partner is about to have sex with someone if that wasn't sort of an anxiety that you had? And some people, that's how they do their polyamory. I don't do it that way. I would not want to do it that way. I would not feel the need to, I trust my partners enough to know that they would date people who are good for them. So I don't really have an anxiety around that, frankly. But I know that this is a really common way that people approach it. And I would actually agree with Decolonizing Love's ultimate conclusion on this, where they say that the people who are wanting to do stuff like that are not really in polyamorous relationships. They're more so in open relationships where, of course, people can go and fuck other people as long as the relationship between the primary partners is protected, right? And I think that that is a really shitty approach to non-monogamy, but it is one that I've seen many, 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 many times. And of course, being in the position I'm in as a Black trans woman, right? Quite frequently, I am in a situation where I am the partner who just so happens to be valued the least, right? So frequently, their hierarchy that they're saying is not a hierarchy feels layered to me. I've openly spoken about how, and this isn't necessarily by design, I've had a lot of history dating white men. A lot of those white men are married to white women. It feels weird for me to be on a date with a white man and have him have to have a conversation with his white wife, right? To have sex with me, the new Black girl that he just started dating, right? And when you look at the AI art that Millie generated, you will notice a theme where the couple is always white and the dejected people who are supposed to be beneath them are always people of color, right? To me, it really does give the vibe that this blog came out of Millie's negative experiences with interracial relationships. I mean this with no disrespect, but I really do get the vibe that Decolonizing Love as a blog is more about decolonizing a white man's attention span than anything else. I think that's kind of why there's this constant over-intellectualizing. That's why all of the lowly secondaries in the AI art are people of color. I think a lot of this comes from Millie's own experiences with interracial dating, right? In an area that is predominantly white. A lot of the stuff that they say only really makes sense to me in that context. This was a post that, in my opinion, also sort of revealed some questionable things when it comes to their ideology. We don't avoid temptation. We look at it soberly. Our ongoing 14-year relationship is made possible due to the radical honesty and direct communication we have. Truthfully, who has never been attracted to anyone else besides their current partner? Do you really think that multiple people won't come across your path with whom you won't connect in deep, transformative ways? And if you truly love someone, wouldn't you want them to live a life as full as possible? Possessiveness is cowardice. It's much better to let them explore, see if they honor your relationship when the bars of the cage are let down. I love that he always comes back to me by choice, no matter whom he dates. That's real love. I have a theory that open relationships last longer because passion is constantly reignited, as you're not with them as often as in traditional monogamous nesting relationships. Nick lives between me and his girlfriend. He also travels abroad a lot. So whenever I see him, our time isn't taken for granted. And there are so many exciting stories we can relay to each other. He's truly my best friend. Also, if you're constantly dating new people, you've got to maintain yourself. Monogamous people tend to let themselves go after finding their spouses because they feel like there's no point further, while we believe your sexual evolution doesn't stop at 30. Domesticity does lower testosterone, which is why sometimes people cheat. They want to rejuvenate themselves, but that quick fix leads to long-term issues. Non-monogamy is the ability to have the best of both worlds. Our long-term partnerships ensure secure attachment and oxytocin. But because we're not nested nor locked into a routine, we're not boring out our dopamine, serotonin, or testosterone levels. That's the secret to 14 years of a passionate love affair. Follow us for more polyamory content from a decolonizing lens. Domesticity decreases testosterone. You know, men and women have testosterone, right? Yes, it is in some ways in control of your sex drive, right? But men naturally lose testosterone as they age. That is a very normal part of a man getting older, right? It has nothing to do with domesticity. Not at all. Is there something to getting yourself together to go on a date and keeping up with yourself that probably makes some poly folks a bit more attractive? Yeah, I mean, the internet doesn't seem to believe that, but sure, you know, my experience is that when you are going out dating new people, you do tend to take care of yourself a bit better because you're consistently trying to impress new people. But this bullshit is a cope, in my opinion. It is totally a cope. This is pseudoscience that is incredibly patriarchal. The idea that men have to have their testosterone tended to by women is an incredibly misogynistic and patriarchal bit of pseudoscience. I feel like that's some bullshit that maybe Nick convinced them to believe. That's not true. And if I'm being completely honest, this particular post reads to me like Millie coping. More than anything. It reads to me like Millie trying to accept some of the crumbs in her relationship. And I kind of get from this particular post that there's some dissonance that she maybe has around Nick's relationships. And to me, the most damning thing is Decolonizing Love's perspective on Israel. I mentioned that Israel exists and someone became upset. It's possible to oppose the Israeli genocide of Palestinians while acknowledging the existence of Israel. Additionally, one can advocate for an end to apartheid and support a two-state solution. Similar to how South Africa ended up apartheid without forcibly removing the white population, desiring liberation does not mean harboring hatred towards the opposing side. I don't understand people who say that they're not into politics. Do you realize that politics affects every aspect of your existence? Furthermore, it's one more thing to be ignorant, but it's incredibly sad to be devoid of humanity and compassion towards others. Ashkenazi Jews are as indigenous to Israel as a person who vacated an apartment a decade ago is a tenant of the building. But here's the thing, Israel exists. I don't think we should try to undo its existence, even though it is a creation of settler colonialism. We should end apartheid policies. I'm just over anyone but Mizrahi Jews who have an unbroken, continuous presence in the Middle East, claiming to be indigenous to the region. How far must Israel's ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians go before Europe's justified guilt over the Holocaust no longer hinders Europe from challenging Israel? I know that a lot of you guys only follow me on here, but if you do follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you would know that I am pro-Palestinian, and I do not believe in defending Israel in its current form. And I think when talking about Israel, it is very important to understand that the extermination of the Palestinians was always part of it.
December 1940. Amongst ourselves, it must be clear that there is no place for both peoples in this country. The only solution is Eretz Israel, or at least the west part of Eretz Israel, without Arabs. There is no room for compromise on this point, and there is no other way but to transfer the Arabs from here to the neighboring countries, to transfer them all. Except maybe for Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Old Jerusalem, we must not leave a single village, not a single tribe. There is no other way out. If the Arabs leave the country, it will be broad and wide open for us. And if the Arabs stay, the country will remain narrow and miserable.
I'm not going to defend Israel and their right to genocide. I'm just not going to. In the same way that I would condemn America for doing the same and inspiring Hitler that started the Holocaust, that justified Israel, I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to ignore it. Congo, Sudan, There's many places where this is happening, and all of it is happening because of colonization. Israel as a state exists to be a bastion of civilization amongst barbarism, right? That's the idea behind it, right? So while you're defending Israel and calling yourself decolonized, I need you to understand that the plan for Israel has always been to exterminate Palestinians. And that is why I don't support the state of Israel. And I think that it does say a lot about your politics when you do. It's one thing to have human care for people on both sides, right? Like I certainly do. Some of my friends are Israeli and they also oppose the occupation, right? So to me personally, that's how I feel. That's how I feel as my extension of my attempt to decolonize my own understanding of the world. It's impossible to look at Israel and not see this settler colonialism that is happening there and the genocide that they are doing to justify it. It is impossible. So I think that Decolonizing Love defending Israel is like, I think it says a lot. I just want for people to take everything with a grain of salt and recognize that just because the so-called poly experts say that it's a bad idea does not actually mean that it is. Does not actually mean that you are going down the wrong path. You just may be going down a different path. It's sad to me that some of Decolonizing Love's advice has ruined relationships. It's sad to me that some people went to their peer support and left it feeling like they may need to dump their partner. To me, that is really, really sad. And I just want for everyone out there who's trying to find information to take it with a grain of salt, including what I say, right? And recognize that there are a lot of people doing non-monogamy that all have their own way of doing it. And as I said, some of the poly experts themselves aren't great at maintaining these relationships. So hopefully that has been food for thought. Anyway, I would love to know what you guys have to say about this particular video. I know that I have not seen you guys in a while, so I'm looking forward to reading all of the comments in the comment section below. If you are looking forward to my video about polyfamily, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to this channel. My subscribers hopefully get notified whenever I post a video, right? You guys get notified. You've already done that thing and made sure that you click all so you get all notifications, right? I know you. I know that you're hot and introspective and you've done that already. You've definitely done that already. If you do support what I do over here, please go and check me out on Patreon, where I've been uploading some exclusive content. Patreon is where I have some more direct conversations with my audience about what's going on in my life. I've been going through it, girl. I've been going through it. And so I've definitely uploaded a couple of very emotional vlogs that you may be into if you are into that sort of thing. On YouTube, I also have a membership where I do upload content of me responding to comments on my videos. I'm still waiting to get more comments on my last video before I film the next one. So let me know how those of you guys who have been watching those videos have been feeling about those videos. I'm in a very experimental space when it comes to like extra content. So if you guys enjoy the extra content, please let me know. I am very much open to receiving feedback right now. On that note, I will see you guys next time. And as per usual, I want you to always remember and to never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.